Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. On Thursday, Durham City Council is meeting to talk about its budget for the next year. And one item proposes a new office to help survivors of violent crime in the city. It would be called the Office of Survivor Care. WRAL Durham reporter Monica Casey joins us from the Bull City to explain how this would work. Monica, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What do we know about this proposed Office of Survivor Care?
So what we have in the budget right now is just funding for this year. And this first year is going to be a lot of planning. So we're not going to see anything happening immediately that's community facing with this right off the bat. It's envisioned as a 3-year pilot program. When I say planning, that means there's obviously a lot of questions about who exactly this will serve. What is the definition of a survivor who's going to be eligible for services? But we do know that the focus is going to be on listening to the community and healing for survivors and possibly their families. They have a goal of being as inclusive as possible. So right now we know that they asked for $220,000 for this first year. They estimate this would cost about $1 million over the full 3 years, but some of that money could be reimbursed by a state crime victims compensation fund. That takes us to a little bit about what this office is proposed to do. So in addition to basically focused on peer support and trauma care for these victims of violence, they may also be providing homicide victims' families with up to $5,000 for funeral expenses. And they're also going to be able to help people apply for compensation fund claims, which is something that, if you can imagine, if you just lost a loved one, it's just one more thing on your plate that is just too much to deal with. So in addition to providing more services for people, they're also going to help people get better access to the services that are already out there that are sometimes difficult to navigate, especially if you're coming right off of grief like that.
Okay, this sounds like a pretty comprehensive plan that's been put together. Is this something that they're modeling off of other places? Have other cities done something like this?
So right now, we aren't seeing anything exactly like this in other cities. We've done a little bit of research on that, and the people who are behind this plan tell me this seems like Durham will be one of the first to do something like this with this survivor-centric approach to dealing with violence.
Who came up with this idea?
This was very much community-led.
To start out for a sound check, I'm going to ask each of you to say and spell your first name and then your last name for me, and I'll have you go first.
Susan Dunlap. I am Parish Associate at First Presbyterian Church, and I'm co-chairing the Gun Violence Action Team of Durham CAN.
Ketty Telemak. I am the lead organizer, executive director of Durham CAN. We organize around issues and problems that community raises up, and this was the desire of the community over a year ago.
So back in 2021, the city, the county, and the school district created a community safety and wellness task force, and that group was basically asked to recommend programs that will help with violence prevention, intervention, and re-entry into the community.
We started this research, and then we called our candidates to accountability in the fall to support this office, and seeing it come through and be in the budget just completes the circle.
They had this really solid, comprehensive 69-page report that I would definitely recommend checking out if this is an issue in Durham you are interested in, because they have a lot of information about what they learned. They also have backup from another pilot program that ran from September of 2022 for about a year till September of 2023 that was called Prescriptions for Repair. So that was funded in part by the city of Durham and Duke, and that program was co-directed by a doctor from Duke, Henry Rice, and a woman named Marcia Owen. They used community-trained facilitators to listen to survivors' stories of gun violence to try to learn what do people need that maybe isn't out there for them. They wanted to hear from people firsthand about their experiences. So that pilot program, Prescriptions for Repair, also recommended this Office of Survivor Care. So there is a lot of community support behind this office.
All right, Monica, let's take a quick break right there, and we'll be right back. Monica, before the break, you were kind of explaining how this was really driven by the community and some of the feedback that was given for how the city could be more helpful to people who've experienced violence. What is the overall picture of crime in Durham so far this year?
It is not good this year.
I think of Durham as bleeding.
If you're watching the news, gun violence is on a rise in Durham, and it's in specific communities that desperately need support.
The police chief just presented the first quarter crime report last week to City Council. That first quarter covers January to March, and those numbers weren't too bad. It was kind of a quiet start to the year, but the last 2 months in Durham have been incredibly violent. We're now up to 98 people shot in Durham this year, compared to 73 at this time last year and 95 in 2022. So we are outpacing last year. We know 17 people have been fatally shot this year. We are also continuing to see the trend of juveniles committing crime. The numbers for this year track right in line with last year. We are seeing juvenile petitions filed on children as young as 8 and 9 years old for things like larceny, but we're also seeing these juveniles be the victims of crime. So far this year, 16 people, 17 and under, have been shot in Durham. So these are staggering numbers. Even one is too many, of course, but this is a bleak picture of what things look like right now.
And how would this Office of Survivor Care fit in with some of the other strategies Durham has to cut down on crime?
One thing Durham has been very focused on is the right solution to a particular problem. One example of that would be the HEART team, the unarmed first responders who can come to a situation where maybe someone is in a mental health crisis and law enforcement isn't necessary. Durham is trying to think outside the box rather than always involving the criminal justice system. This Office of Survivor Care is focused on repair and healing and finding closure in other ways. And so I think bringing this to the local government level makes a big difference. There are a lot of wonderful groups in Durham doing the difficult work and working with people who are victims of violence.
But we need more, and that's evident just because the data and the numbers show that gun violence is increasing in Durham.
I mean, another way to sort of summarize, I think what we're both saying is, I think an Office of Survivor Care is both the compassionate thing to do for people who have suffered in this way, and it also has practical benefits in terms of cutting off the cycle of violence, preventing further acts of violence. So it's really those two reasons that the Office of Survivor Care are a good idea.
There's an accountability piece here with public officials if they do choose to pass this in the budget, of bringing this to the local government level.
And what do advocates have to say about this plan, and has there been any opposition to it?
So advocates emphasize this is definitely not going to be the only solution to gun violence, but they say this is the compassionate thing to do for people who have been victims. And they also believe this is going to help stop the cycle of violence. Unfortunately, the data shows some families, if they are victims of gun violence and they don't get the support that they need, they can sometimes either be victims again or offend themselves. And so the goal is to kind of stop this cycle. In terms of opposition to the Office of Survivor Care, one piece that I've heard from some people is just that they wish it wasn't needed. They wish that this, it's predicated on the notion that there's going to be violence and that people will need help recovering from it. And so the most strong piece of opposition I've heard is just that they hope that this is going to be a pilot program and not a permanent one, because maybe eventually this won't be needed in Durham.
Right. And obviously the meeting on Thursday, that is sort of the next step for the work session that your city leaders are looking at. So after that, what is the process for getting this off the ground?
So this would be housed, if it goes through as it is currently in the budget, in the Community Safety Department. That's also where the HEART program is housed. Right now, the funding is for 1 year, and those first 6 months especially will be a lot of planning just to kind of get things off the ground. This budget, this year this fiscal year. We'll start July 1st, and so they would probably start planning really by then. But they're hoping that it can be outward facing by the second year. It is safe to look at this and say if they're going to fund the first year of a pilot and the first year is mostly about planning, it is likely they would probably fund at least another year or two of it to get the plan off the ground. So we might be revisiting this, I would say maybe early 2025 once they've had about 6 months. I did speak with the director of the Community Safety Department, Ryan Smith, who tells me it is still very early and they're going to be focused on listening about how they can make this office as strong as it can be while serving the needs of the community that they are hearing from people who are actually victims of this violence.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Monica, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with local news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.